This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with George Rivera for the first time. You're the season pass CEO, and you're a buyback time strategist for 7, 8, and 9 figure founders. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, doing great. Excited to be here.
Well, get a couple of things out of the way. We are on Podmatch, and we have a QR code up there that is the Podmatch link. That's how podcasters and hosts and podcasters can find each other. And if you want to check that out, scan that and check out what you can do if you're looking to increase the viability of your podcast by getting more guests and getting you linked up with the right host. But other than that, I want to welcome you here again. We're going to talk about your book, which is the buyback time formula, and your story. Before we get to the heart of your story, I have to ask every guest a couple questions like what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's part of kind of the foundation of what I'm doing. A couple of weeks before my dad passed away, he told me, "Don't miss Leo's games. I missed too many of yours."
Mhm.
And Leo's my son. He was just born a few months prior in that year, and at that point, he's already learned how to walk and talk. He was again 9, 10 months old, and I'm missing those moments. And so when he told me that, it gave me this flashback to the early 90s when I was in middle school, high school, played in about 40 basketball games. And I remember I would score a basket and I'd look to the stands where I would hope to see my loving and approving father's smile sitting there. And it
Mhm.
was completely empty, no dad in the stands. But my teammates would score and their dads were sitting there in the stands cheering on like crazy. And I remember one time after my teammate scored and dad just loving on his kid, I was like, I wish that was my dad.
Mm.
And that would have completely crushed my dad. He was a good man. He was the textbook provider. He was a medical doctor, owned his own practice, very successful on paper, but the home life wasn't quite where it should have been, and it wasn't hostile, but his just lack of presence, you could just sort of feel like a lack of leadership in the home. And your family's either going to get it from dad or they're going to get it from somebody else, but there will always be seeking that leadership no matter what. And so when my dad made that statement, there was like some beautiful closure to whatever that was in my youth. I'm not a therapist. I don't know how to label whatever that was,
Yeah.
but that was one part of it. The other part of it was like, oh my gosh, I am you all over again. I'm version 2 of my dad. My dad had this thing where he'd give us nice homes, cars, and trips to Europe every summer. And that's what I was doing to my family in exchange for my presence: nice homes, cars, trips to Europe, thinking that I'm providing, I'm doing it for the family, even though they never really asked for it. But in my head, I'm like, this is
Yeah.
my justification. And so, yeah, to go back to your question, why I'm doing it, it's because of my dad's words to me before he passed away. And first, I had to adopt this for myself. But once I did that, I'm like, okay, the world needs to hear this. And that's why I'm here.
'Cause I think a lot of times in our kind of materialistic kind of you know m- monetary monetized um, society tends to be like in capitalist type of systems is that money transactional type of behavior because I was a sociology major like it's kind of driving the mores. The social structure is built on that, and it's very hierarchical. And people tend to think, well, that's the box, and you're supposed to stay in the box. And when you go outside the box, you get criticized.
Hmm.
And when you have to kind of decide, like, like what is logical, what is emotional, and what is kind of like the heart.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we're told, just do STEM, right? It's all STEM. But I'm a liberal arts major and I'm an artist, I'm a musician, podcaster, and I'm a software guy. Got all three hats, left and right brain. And what you find is you can't just be all logical. You can't be all just heart. You got to figure out how to merge that and have a balance. And it sounds like you're trying to create this like father first owner OS, which I think is like operating system because I'm a systems guy. Is
Yeah.
that what the OS means?
Yeah, that's what it is. And it's just really just structuring your life to prioritize the things that matter, because one day we're going to get to the end of our lives. And I saw it. I saw it in my dad. And, what I'll tell people is I've never heard anybody say, I'm so glad I missed your game for that client meeting, at the end of our days. It's like nobody ever says that. And it's like when you get to that point, you won't even remember the name of that client, but you will remember whether or not you were there for the games and the moments that matter, because those are moments that you'll just cherish. And so, we can all say that when we get to the end of our days, we'll probably, pick and choose and point at things that we regret, could have done better. That's fine. I think that's human nature. But my goal is to help people minimize the regrets by the time to get to those days. And they can look back and say, you know what? Yeah, there's things I regret. But when I became aware that there was a different way, I made my best effort to change that. And I can be proud of myself for doing that. And I feel like that'll give a lot of people at peace when that moment comes.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs run into the trap of they don't want to delegate because they want to really own everything. But at some point, you're the choke point. I work with startups, and there ends up being a point where like the founders have to start letting go. And I'm one of those guys they let go to,
Yeah.
and it's like it's always hard because they want to own it, and I understand why they want to own it because it's their baby. But eventually, like you can't grow because there's no way you have enough time in the day or the week or the year when you're the bottleneck.
That's right. Yeah, and that is my story. I was the bottleneck. And yeah, there's a part of that where that's the entrepreneur identity. It's like this is my baby. Nobody can do it as well as I can. And so I'm going to hang on to these things even against logic, because it's an emotional thing. And yeah, it's part of our identity. It's what people form their thoughts about us because of our role in our business. There's like a little bit of a hero complex to that. There's some dopamine associated with being the hero in your business, solving the problems. And in reality, like when I was living this, I thought that I was doing right. I thought I was being a good leader, but in reality, I was being a horrible leader. I wasn't letting my team take over responsibilities. I wasn't training them on how to think for themselves. I wasn't equipping them and empowering them to be better at whatever it is that they're doing, so that if and when they move on, because there's a lot of turnover in life and in careers, that they'll have a better argument as to why they're worth more money, because they can make decisions on their own. And so if they're always depending on boss, that's not gonna make for a great resume. So there's so many
Yes,
layers to this.
there's a lot of layers because a lot of times it's like if you think about it, I always bring it back to like a band, right? Like, 'cause I'm a musician, and there's some bands where you have a guy, like a Pete Townsend, he writes all the parts. Like for the Who, he wrote all the parts. He actually had demos where he had the bass part, the drum part, all the parts, and the singing. And he'd give it to the band, and he tried to top down it, but eventually, like Entwistle was a better bass player than him, right? Keith Moon is a way better drummer than him, and Daltrey could actually belt it out better than he can. So eventually, he had to let go of that demo and allow the rest of the band to take it. And that's always like the push and pull with artists because you'll get some alpha that wants to control the whole thing, and then they have to let go. And if they don't let go, usually the band breaks up.
Yeah.
So you ruin it. Like at a certain point where you actually it will metastasize and will just destroy the whole thing. Even though that's your vision, like you can't continue.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And yeah, and like you said earlier, at some point you have to let go. I mean, there's a season where the founder is sort of doing everything, unless you've got this great, stockpile of cash and resources where you can do this from day one. So when you're starting out there, you are playing multiple roles. But what takes you to $1 million, $2 million a year in revenue, it's not going to be what takes you to five. And what gets you to five is not going to be what takes you to 10 plus. And so the founder needs to understand that you're going to scale one of two things. You're going to scale freedom, or you're going to scale chaos. And a lot of my journey was scaling chaos, and the price for scaling chaos, you feel it at home. And so again, my message is, doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, can you go from being like a sole proprietor or an LLC to finally being a board stock company? And then, you're not the only one making the decisions anymore. Like, so like if you once you get into that realm, you start having to let go. You go from being like 5 people, 10 people, to 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Like once you get to that structure, you have the CFOs, you have your accountant departments, you have your IT department. So like you might want to have like a certain exert control over one that you're passionate about, right? But you can't really control everything.
Right. Yeah. And with good leadership, you can provide them structure and you can give them decision rights so that you at least give them a kind of like these boundaries of control, and anything that goes outside of that, then that's when you can be brought in through a proper structure. Not random pings. Hey, you got 5 minutes for this, and we know it's never 5 minutes. 5 minutes is code for like it could be an hour. And context switching also just kills productivity for the founder.
Oh yeah.
Founders working
Priority.
on something awesome, like in my case I'd work on sales copy and things that really move the needle for the business, and then I get a ping from somebody, hey, just 5 minutes, can you take a look at this infrastructure we're trying to set up? And I'm just like, I'm in copy mode, you want me to go to infrastructure techie mode? And then okay, I'm jumping over, and this 5 minute meeting is going on for an hour, and then it takes me like 30 minutes to an hour to get back into the
That's
copy
where you
mode.
yeah,
And
that's where
it's
you
like,
kinda need, like, your CTO and
yeah.
your CFO and your CIO, right? So, I've worked with these big insurance company structures, and they're kinda actuary driven. So, like, most of the CEOs are come from the actuary discipline because it's about the algorithms.
Yeah.
And then you got the sales guys, they don't really care about the algorithms. They care about commission.
Yeah.
And so you got the competing, and then the IT guys, they're like between the regulators and trying to do like, break things, like trying to be disruptors. So there's a push and pull. It's like, well, the regulators say this, and disruption ideology says that. And
Yeah.
then they're kind of hitting the wall all the time. And it's like, well, who's gonna be the one to actually make sure everything is kind of, you know, that people have ownership to make the decision so you're not the bottleneck again.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, like, you're dealing with crisis A, B, C, D, all the way all 25 the letters of the alphabet, and
Yeah.
maybe all at once.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I've been in those fires where it's all at once, and that's the stuff that just pulls you out of the presence at home. That's what interrupts dinner time, interrupts 3 a.m. wake up calls,
Yeah.
kills productivity because you're waking up stressed out, frustrated, and again, it just bleeds into the home. So there's that tension. Your team, yeah, everybody on your team has different motivations, and so yeah, I would call that scaling chaos if that feels like you're losing
Mhm.
control there.
So, when you get into that kind of situation, it's like in relationships, like, microcosm, macrocosm. That's like with sociology terms. Like microcosm is like your personal relationship, and the macrocosm is like when you're interacting with a bigger group, like outer society. And both that tends to bleed to each other. And the issue becomes like, can you set boundaries? Because a lot of times, like people, if you're a people pleaser type of mindset, you have a hard time setting boundaries, right? And if you're just a person that's trying to, maybe you're suffering from imposter syndrome, and that's why you feel you have to do everything. So you don't want to get into the psychological, but some of that does affect it. It kind of bleeds into like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there is a lot of psychological. And, again, I'm not an expert therapist or anything like that, but there's that identity, and there's like the source of those dopamine hits, and it's almost like you have to retrain your brain to seek its dopamine from somewhere else.
Hmm.
And when I started applying this, my dopamine hits would come from seeing the proper delegation strategies actually work, and it got
Hmm.
me addicted to seeing this work. And I was like, what else can I do this for? So I retrained my brain to seek the joy out of delegating versus being the hero in every situation.
Yeah, you have to. It's like remapping. I'm
Yeah.
a software guy. Like you remap the whole structure of the system, so it's like a reset, initialization. Structural change versus non-structural change. It's like when you look at that, that's hard to do because if you're addicted to chaos behavior, like like chaos, and this is what a lot of artists are addicted to, right? Because their hit was based on the most painful thing that ever happened to them. So A&R says, do that again, right? But you're like, to do that again, I actually have to be in a bad place. Do you actually need to be in that bad place to actually be successful? And you have to really learn, like, how can I do that with using my imagination without having to live through it like Jack Kerouac on the road? Like, do I
Mhm.
actually have to live through it, or can I use my imagination and my experience to craft that without having to live it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that there's a lot of self-analysis required there, and just to be aware that that's even possible. And some people are just living life on autopilot, thinking that it just has to be this way. They don't know that there's another way, but I'm here to say that there is. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And my goal is that people see it quickly, because moments are going by, and the longer you wait, the more you miss out on life. And you got a family that needs you and depends on you and needs your leadership, in addition to your company. Like, this affects both your business and your life
Right.
at home.
Yeah, because like you got to learn how to actually be present. And I think a lot of people they kind of play with that, like they have a mask on and they think they're being present, but they're really somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I like to say proximity doesn't equal presence. Just because you and I might be close, I might be like listening to your words, but my brain is still stuck trying to solve yesterday's problems. Or I'm looking ahead at, oh my gosh, have we done this or that, and how that's going to impact us, versus being present with the person that I'm with. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff we take at home, and our family, whether they say it or not, they feel that. And
Yeah, and they know
it's
it.
not over this one big blow up. It's little moments of where the trajectory is heading in a direction where you don't really want it to go.
Yeah, because you have to delegate. Like I saw some point you have is like delegate outcomes instead of tasks. So maybe you can talk about like what that means, like from your perspective.
Yeah. So I had go back in my life 10 years ago, and I was stuck in my founder prison, as I call it. And I had this big team, growing revenue, just very successful business, at least on paper. Home life questionable, but sticking on the business part. I was killing myself working, I don't know, 70, sometimes as high as 90 hours in a week.
Mhm.
And had I been in a conversation and I'm explaining what's going on, and somebody says, "Hey, man, you should just delegate more," I'd be like, "I'm the king of delegation. I got 40 people working for me. Every time I have a problem, I hire somebody else." And of course, looking back, hiring more people just adds to the problem of me being the bottleneck, because I was delegating tasks. I wasn't delegating the outcome. And the difference is, when you delegate a task, you're not necessarily showing them what the finished product looks like. You're not giving them the liberty to reach their own conclusion, assuming they're the right person. There's a process for getting the right person in there. But when you're just delegating tasks, that's just delayed involvement. That just means you got it for a little while, but eventually it's going to come back to me. And when it would, I would just rob from the future. I would say it's just easier if I do it myself. And I do it. But what I was doing is training the team that George is the firefighter that puts out the problems. Just get it to 80, 90%, and he'll just finish it off. And
Yeah,
the crazy thing is, I'm paying them to do the work, but I'm finishing the work for them. And I was doing that for a number of years. That's kind of crazy. And I had to like step out and see what was going on to really, feel like, okay, this cannot continue. This is not sustainable.
yeah. The thing is, it's like the perfection trap. Artists run into this thing where they'll work on a song, do like 100 versions, and by the time they get to version 101, they actually destroyed the idea, right? Because the idea was probably really good at version 4,
Yeah.
but they got obsessive and they didn't let go. I mean, and also sometimes it's like, if somebody comes in, like your producer or your engineer, and they say, change the key, like change the type of chord you're using. And then they're like, you don't want to do it. Right. And so it really, like, what's the point of having these other people around you if you're not going to listen to them?
Yeah.
like if the bass player says, the bass part you gave me, it really doesn't work. I've been a bass player for 25 years. Like, I think the one I have works, but if you're so into being a control freak, you won't take his part. And then that kind of destroys that relationship.
Hmm.
'Cause that person, the bass player, will say, well, he doesn't respect me as a bass player. So you think about what maybe the other discipline, like maybe accountant, like he's CPA or actuary, you know, data architect, and they give you like their best idea, and you tell them like, no, that's not it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. I mean, we can be our own worst enemy when it comes to that, and just, yeah, over analyzing and thinking, too critical, thinking we're doing better as we're stewing over it and coming up with all these different variations. Sometimes we just gotta run with version 4, like you said, versus like stalling and waiting for the perfect one that never really comes. It really only comes over time as you really massage it, once you start getting some feedback and getting it out there versus letting it live in your head forever. And like you said, version 101 is different from version one, and you're almost like back to square one, if that
You
makes
kind of
sense.
lost the plot because a lot of times that their emotional impact is really closer because you're not editing it. So what you tend to do is you take out the vulnerability, you take
Yeah.
out the happy accidents. And what we find as artists is sometimes if something's imperfect, it's actually better than when you try to make it perfect,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So if it's actually got timing changes and chord changes that are a little off, that being a little off might be the secret sauce. It's kind of same thing in engineering. The happy accident, you have a project plan, says you're going to do X, you end up doing Y and Z.
Hmm.
Y and Z are actually better than what was in the plan. But if you're too focused on the plan, you will totally say, "Well, it wasn't in the plan, so we can't do
Yeah,
it."
no, exactly. And so, yeah, maybe this is more of a trust your gut on the earlier phases versus letting it get completely out of control.
Yeah, it's kind of like agile development versus waterfall.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's iterative development allows you to kind of have like what you see on your iPhone every night. It's updating. You get different versions of that app because we didn't know yesterday what we know today. In the waterfall world, we try to make it perfect and we release it once a year.
Hmm.
In the
Yeah.
agile world, we release it as many times as it needs to get released to fix it.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
don't consider we're upset that we had a bug, but we're not killing ourselves because we had a bug.
Hmm.
We'd fix it,
Yeah.
you know.
N- Nice. No, I can totally resonate with that.
And so I think it's that perfection trap that people put themselves in. And now we have a lot of tools. We got all these AI tools, we got robotics and automations. And so now you like I see that one of your points was like, how do you get your 10 to 20 hours back? Well, it's like, smart delegation, smart use of AI. And I am AI certified, but like the thing in AI, Amazon ran into this. You can't just vibe code with no controls because AI is powerful, but it will do hallucinations, right? It will actually sometimes give you bad stuff, and you can't think it's like it's 100% replacement of a human being. Like
No.
we're still in control of what it should do. If you make it in control of itself, then that might be a problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we lose control over it, is just, yeah, trusting it and just letting it run wild. It can get you 85, 90% there, but there's still going to be that human element that needs to be like, all right, does this really work? Do we really need this? And yeah, so you're spot on with that.
Yeah, because I mean, and also it's like, is it the right tool? It's kind of sexy now. Everybody throws it at everything.
Yeah.
But like I was looking in China, like they were using it for very specific sectors,
Mhm.
not just throwing it at everything, but
Yeah.
using it for very specific sectors and then refining it. And then you get like the success story like BYD, which is now one of the most powerful like electric car companies in the world because they focused from like a government policies to enterprise policies, and they are winning because of alignment.
Yeah.
Winning because of like strategic thinking rather than tactical thinking.
Yeah.
And I
Nope. That
wonder if we do you think we run to too much short-term tactical instead of strategic with the founders you talk to?
Absolutely. I think, and I'm so guilty of this, and a lot of the founders that I talk to, yeah, just too short, I guess, of a long term view, if that makes sense. We're only thinking about maybe the days and weeks ahead, which is fine. You have to have that view, but yeah, if we're not set up for the long term in the way that we have our systems in place, then yeah, that kind of goes back to the scaling chaos part. And yeah, so you need to have that longer term view of, okay, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to go. We need systems in place to make that happen, and how do we do that with the least amount of breakage and disruption, so I can still have my presence at home and have a business that's growing at the same time.
And also like the key person dependency, it's not just like the CEO. What
Mhm.
I've found over time is you'll get a subject matter expert or that key person dependency, and the problem is they think they own it because they wrote it. So, like, good examples, like guys who wrote COBOL mainframe stuff for these big insurance companies, they become key person dependencies. and like they don't give up the keys. There's a whole generation of people that don't know mainframe code. They don't know COBOL, don't know machine language. They don't know the older languages. So these guys become a bottleneck and they know it. And they basically kind of lord it over the company and they don't want to give up the keys. So some people might think, well, they're a great asset, but they're a great liability.
Yeah. That's the don't get hit by a bus prayer,
Yeah.
because that'll destroy our business. But I think that might be a short-term benefit for that person, but I don't think it's a long-term benefit in the sense of like anybody like the leadership will be like, we're too dependent on you, we need to find a way to not be that dependent on you. And there's other systems in place. It might not be a overnight thing that is solved, but it should be something that the company works towards because yeah, no one person should be like holding the secret key that if they get hit by a bus, destroys the business or a component of the business.
Yeah. And then it's like that can equate to like maybe it's that accountant or it's that software architect that's that person, but he actually could be the CEO of that person.
Exactly. Yeah, could be. Yeah, the one running the whole thing, and whatever role it is, it's not good. I know the person who thinks that they're the key person is like, this is my secret sauce, but yeah, there's not really much more secret sauce these days. It's getting less and less, and it's all about just the structure and proper execution.
Now, for like the idea of quick wins, what kind of systems or scoreboards or decisions that you have to put in place? And is there any particular sequential order for that?
Yeah, usually I'll walk clients through a process of shining a light on what are the things that they're not doing. And there's a process for that, but just kind of keeping it high level, we identify pretty much everything that the client is doing. And then once we have that list of things, we run it through what I call the 10K per hour filter. In my case, my zone of genius work is worth $10,000 an hour. The founders could be different, could be more, could be less. Figure out what that number is, and then you run all of those things that the founder is doing through that filter. And then on the other side of that, you're going to come up with a list of things you should not be doing, and then a list of things that keep doing because these are the activities that bring in revenue for the business. That's the keep list. Now, the list of things that we don't keep, there's only 3 things you could do with those things. And I call it the time liberation trifecta. And that's eliminating anything that doesn't move the needle, that's automating anything that repeats, and then that's delegating with the outcome in mind, not just the task like we discussed. And so you run it through that process, and that's the first step of removing the founder as the bottleneck so they can restore that presence at home.
Yeah, that's really important because it's like I think sometimes people feel guilty about um like whether or not they should be spending time at home or whether or not they should be the soldier working like 160 hours. you know so because they kind of know Silicon Valley's got this thing where they think you should be that guy doing the 160.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm like, it's diminishing returns. This is kind of like my old like this like does the guy in the cube doing 8 hours straight of COBOL programming when a boss goes by and say, "Well, that guy's a good soldier. He's at his desk. His car's still in the parking lot." But when you look at it, what happens if the guy who spent 4 hours, boss can't find him at his desk, but his code is actually better? So are you measuring the guy who's sitting there, cars in the parking lot after 7 o'clock at night? He's at the desk, but if you actually look at his code, it's not that great. But you're measuring the other guy based on like, oh, he's not at his desk. No, he's at home with his wife and kid. He actually went to the game. But you saying the other guy's better because he's at his desk.
Yeah, that's such a flawed way of looking at it. Kind of the old school mentality, which I know there's still a lot of it out there. But yeah, now we need to start looking at it from a productivity standpoint. Like, okay, maybe we're paying both of them the same, but whose output is better? I'm not, micromanaging minutes on the clock. I don't even say micromanaging. I'm judging them based on the output. And like you said, the one who did it better that's the one I'd say that's the keeper, and you do whatever you want on your personal time from a business standpoint, so long that your work is better. So,
Yeah. It's
my
kind of
hope
like
is
the
that people,
neurodivergent argument. Like also when the pandemic happened, people were able to work at home. When they find if you technically check it, that people who work at home actually put more hours in. But then some of the people started thinking that if you were in the office, that was better. But if you're in the office, you take a coffee break, you go to the bathroom, you go out to lunch. It's like if you're at home, you're looking at your cell phone at whenever. Like you're getting pinged, you're doing the work. You're getting up at 6, you're doing the work. You might get up at 2 and do the work, right? Even though you're at home, you technically actually work more hours. But somebody's thinking, you gotta put them in the cube. You gotta
yeah,
put them in the traffic jam for 2 hours to get to the cube. You gotta put them on the plane in the Uber, and that makes you feel like they're more productive. It's like, really?
yeah. Yeah, no, COVID exposed a lot of just like some of that old school way of thinking. I believe it accelerated the use of technology of things like Zoom and a lot of these virtual meeting things I'm thankful to see that it has eliminated a lot of that travel. But yeah, there's still businesses, as we know, that require that. So I think one day they'll sort of catch up to that.
Yeah, because I just think, like, if you can be as like, I don't know, my daughter's neurodivergent, she's an artist, and the way she works, I mean, sometimes she's, doing her logo work for companies at, like, 3 in the morning, right? And then she's sleeping during the day, right? Because she does it whenever she can do it. She's got multiple contracts, but she can't work in a cube. She just can't. That's not her style, she can't do it. There's some companies that she's approached, right? They want her to be in an office like in San Francisco, and she's like, "Nah, I can't do it."
Mm.
And it's like, it's like it's like you can't figure that out. They can't figure it out. It's like you guys are still, even though today they just can't understand that some people want to have a work life balance. They want to have a soul balance, and really, it's kind of like my daughter knows what she can do and what she can't, and she's not living in the old world where she's trying to fit in that box. And I don't know if some executives understand that, you know.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, there's still plenty of evidence out there that a lot of executives and the higher ups in these companies are still doing things the old way, because I think there's still like a generation that's just how it started, and they're slow adapters, and maybe they're still just trying to buck the trend a little bit, but yeah, eventually I feel like if it's not by them just surrendering to the trend, it's going to be a financial thing because they're going to see their competitors are leveraging virtual and not having all this commercial office space. And as everything's getting more expensive, nothing's getting cheaper.
Yeah, it's global. I mean, like
Yeah,
if you're trying to hang on to your office space, like you could have people and in India, people in Dublin. My company, we got people in Poland, we got people in India, people like in different parts of the world, and they work on different time schedules. We have to figure it out. But like, because we don't even have an office. The company is not set up that way. It's more modern, right? It's figured out to use the global model, find a resource wherever they are, and utilize them.
yeah,
If you're still kind of stuck into your like, oh, it's got to be in my neighborhood, or it's got to be in my country, or it's going to be under my mindset, and I have a Western mindset versus like a global mindset, then you might run into problems.
yeah. Well, and like I said, I think the competition is going to sort of force people to think that way because it's going to be expensive to maintain the offices, and you're going to be missing out on world and global talent when your talent pool is just your local zip code or your local city. So yeah, I think either the environment will force them in that direction, or maybe some people voluntarily go that way because they see where we're headed. But either way, it's heading that way. It's just a matter of time before some people see it.
Yeah, I think really understanding like how do you transfer like true ownership, and what is really like true ownership, and what is like, I guess, the spectrum of like how much should you own,
Hmm, hmm.
to actually execute on your vision. You're the founder. How much of that do you have to own? And how much of it do you delegate in a smart way?
Yeah. So the founder's role is maintaining that vision and then focusing, putting their time on activities that bring revenue to the business. That could be strategic relationships. That could be, evaluating different vendors that help them move the needle. That could be, entering new marketplaces. Every business is different, so they'll have sort of different, higher level revenue moving activities. Then the founder does not need to be doing all the other stuff that is very important to the business, but it doesn't essentially help move the needle. It just supports the revenue that's coming in, things like customer support, tech, HR, all these things. And so those things need to be off of the founder's plate. And you do that by delegating with the outcome in mind, and you transfer ownership to them. And that's by, giving them delegation, delegating what's called decision rights. And so you're giving them boundaries of decisions that they can make without your involvement. For example, one of the things that I got off my plate that I was clutching onto it so hard because this thing's my baby, and I just finally had to let it go. And once I let it go, I was like, why was I ever hanging on to that? But that's a whole nother story. But the topic or the category was finance, accounting. I had an accounting team, and they'd pay, most of the regular bills. But one of the bills or invoices that we would get would be from people that provided us customers and sales. And at the volume that we were at, while I was still clutching onto it, we were doing around $20 million for the year. So it's a high volume business. And so, like a decimal point in the wrong place or a comma in the wrong place, intentional or not, could be a very expensive mistake. Don't ask me how I know that. and so I had some PTSD from some past mistakes. And that was one of the last things. I was like, I have to pay this invoice, or like I have to validate and reconcile this invoice myself, because, it's not that I don't trust the team. And maybe that's an underlying issue. Maybe I didn't trust the team, but I was like, this is a process that I've like perfected, and I'm confident when I validate it myself. And it isn't just an accounting thing where they look at it and say, okay, you have to go into the CRM. It takes a little bit of more techie skills than finance accounting skills, which is why I hung on to that much longer. But it finally got off my plate when I documented the process properly. I handed it off with ownership, and I said, anything under $10,000, you are free to just make the payment. We don't even need to talk about it. Anything over that, let's talk about it. And that took me from, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 hours a week on just that one thing down to like 5 hours a week on it. And so that's how I initially got some time back. Eventually, over time, I went to 0 hours a week on it. But, it's a step-by-step getting there, step-by-step.
Trusting too. Like, you got to trust that your process is understood and
Yeah.
repeatable and executable by somebody other
Absolutely.
than yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the 5 hours a week was essentially spot checking the work. And then eventually I got the confidence. Eventually, they were doing it on their own. I'd never had that issue again. Not saying it can never happen, but now I bought, many hours of my week that I'm giving back to my family. Not only the time, but the stress and the mental energy it took to do all that. Now my family gets the fresh version of husband, fresh version of dad, not the burned out, stressed out version and grumpy version of dad.
Yeah, I think it ends up being a positive on both. If your employees feel like you're not micromanaging, they're going to feel more free to come up with ideas. And then you're going to be more free at home and not have the stress load. So you
Yeah.
actually can relax at home instead of stressing about the next day or next hour.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's all part of getting that stuff off your plate so that the business can grow without you, and you're focused on things that bring in revenue. And of course, you're restoring the bond at home as well.
And it's like that father first, because I think a lot of people think father first is just, being a provider, like you started saying. A lot of men probably just think, if I pay the mortgage, I pay the food bill, I pay for, Jimmy's soccer team, like being able to do that. That's what you
Yeah,
got to do. And if you miss the soccer game, fine, but he got to play. Right. And I think a lot of men, like my dad was a sales guy, and he was always out. And he felt like, well, because he's providing, I get to go to music class, and my brother gets to go do like basketball or something. It's like, so like he felt like, okay, well, you guys get to do it. Mom's handling that. But we were missing him. And then even when he came home, he was kind of so into just trying to de-stress, his de-stressing wasn't really getting involved with us, it's kinda watching the game or listening to jazz. Like, and I got into music because I would sit and listen to jazz, but he still was kinda like that was a solo activity for him, so he wasn't that interactive.
Hmm.
But I appreciated the music, and I kinda got into I'm a musician because of, listening to his records, the records he used to listen to, but, like, he really wasn't as involved as, like, I woulda liked, and I try to not do that with my daughter, and
Yeah.
try to not repeat that.
No, that's yeah. As you say that, I'm having flashbacks. Like when my dad would come home, it'd usually be later in the evening, 8 or 9 o'clock. We're already sort of done with our day. We've had dinner. We're kind of in that wind down, ready for bed mode as children. And yeah, he'd come home. He'd watch TV, eat his dinner in front of the TV, have a glass of wine or two a night, sort of like his de-stressing moment, and then the next day just repeat it all over again. I'm fortunate I had a dad that came and said hello and hugged me and stuff. I know some people don't even have that, so I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, the second he got home, he sort of checked out, de-stressed, and then did it again the next day. And then on the weekends, yeah, I remember he would when he had days off, he would just kind of sit in his music room, his the stereo room, and sort of just listen to music and almost like go somewhere else with his mind for a little while. So yeah, my dad was very similar.
Yeah, and so that's interesting because yeah, I appreciate like, he didn't just wear his headphones, though, I got to listen, like, he actually
Yeah,
wanted everybody to listen.
yeah,
My mom
yeah.
didn't appreciate that.
Making a lot of noise at home.
But at least I got me and my younger brother, we were into music, and we got we became, like, we continued to play we actually wanted to become musicians because of it, because he had a wide appreciation, so we kinda picked up that, but it wasn't like he was actually sitting us down and showing us on a fretboard or showing us on a sax what to do because he didn't know how to play. But he
Yeah.
appreciated music. And he had a very deep appreciation for multiple genres. And so we picked up on that. And we later in life, we had like discussions with him when we were like with our own kids with our dad. And we finally had the deep discussions. Like when me and my brother were like in our 30s, 40s with my dad,
Mhm.
they finally talked to us about like what was going on. Like, why was he like that? He finally started to talk. And we're like, wow. But it's like, it would have been nice if it happened. I mean, it happened. So we're thankful that it happened because he's not here anymore, that we actually had those conversations. But that's the stuff that you don't want to regret. You want to try to have space for that communication, right? And that's why you want to free up your time.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And yeah, as you're talking, that's awesome because like even if dads weren't quote perfect, and there's no perfect dad, but just kind of based on the standard we're talking now, you still get a lot from your dad, and I think that's sort of like a good example of even if you are not even aware of it, you're still having an impact, some positive, but some where we're like left wanting more. And I think is if you don't realize it along the way, you sort of end up to where you get to towards your end days and you're like, I wish I would have done this different, this and that different. But I want to speak to the men who are in the moment now, who have kids at home right now. You need to be aware of this, and I'm telling you, once you're aware of it, you can't unaware yourself of it. Like it's always going to be there. And so
Yeah.
my plea is to be aware and do something about it because you'll never get this time back.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize, time, that's part of the whole like pyramid. You like you got the time, your money, like and some people like they give up the time and they don't consider the consequences of giving up the time. Right. The time's just not money, it's emotional impact. And the lack of time with your family has deep impact on the development of your children. Like
Yeah.
like you said, you ended up repeating a pattern and realized you were repeating it. And it's like an unconscious thing that happens. Like your parents give you patterns, whether you're aware of them or not. You will repeat them until you become more aware.
Yeah, yeah, and this is a topic that's really heavy on my heart right now. Not just because we're talking about this, out to the world, but even just in me personally. So my son's 11 years old, and he loves to what he calls brawl. He loves to brawl every evening. I call it, wrestling, but he calls it brawling. And I made a post yesterday on Facebook, and the title of the post is. I would trade a fortune for one more brawl. And then the author, I put me in the future. And so like I wrote that I cherish these moments because every night he wants to come and wrestle, almost like a little tradition that we have.
Hmm.
And it could be as short as 2 minutes, as long as 10 minutes. And sometimes he'll come in the room and wake me in a dead sleep and say, "Hey, we got a brawl." And for like the initial like minute, if I'm being honest, I'm a little frustrated. I'm like, and I'm deep sleep. I'm in the zone and I'm waking up. And what is going on? Like you saw him sleeping. But anyway, I quickly snap out of it. I'm like, okay, but this is not going to last forever. Yeah, let's brawl. But it takes me a stubborn minute to sort of get in the zone. And I realized that there's going to come a day when he doesn't want to brawl anymore. It's not because we're estranged or anything happened.
He
It's
grows
because
out of
he's
you.
going
Yeah,
to be a man.
he'll grow
And
out
I
of
don't know 18 plus year old men that want to brawl with their dad. Maybe it happens, but I don't know that it's too common. One day I'm going to be like 75 years old, and I'm going to be like, I amassed this fortune. I would trade that fortune to have another brawl with my son.
it. Yeah.
And I'm like, and I don't care if you wake me up 200 times in a night. I want to brawl. And I will leave it there because that'll make me emotional.
No, I think it's important because it's those like precious moments that people calling me is kind of, in music we talk about precious moments in tons of songs, but it is a thing, you know, because like these things that happen in your life, where they're kind of point in time. Artists, we kind of spend a lot of time with doing things that are point in time. Like we try to capture point in time moments for their emotional impact, right? And people hear a song, it triggers that memory because it has that emotional impact. And everybody who hears the song sees a different vision of what it means to them. And it's usually some kind of precious moment, like what you're saying, that comes back, like just comes back and it gets replayed like a movie.
Yeah.
And that's why artists we like to give that to the world because we think it's important. It's the softer things that those things are super important to your life, and it's not about money, right? It's about like how did that make you feel? Don't you want to feel like that, or don't you need that in your life to be a human being? You know,
Yeah.
that's our point.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so deep, and there's so many founders, and just they're living like me of 10 years ago, life on autopilot, moments going by, and we got to stop and be like, we're never going to get this time back. We can always make more money, but this time is so precious. And there'll be a time in the future where you'd give all that you work for, all that you're doing right now, you'd give it up to rewind to where you are now. So let's do that now instead of regretting it later.
Yeah, because the people always like, well, I'm going to do that when I retire. Right, because I'm a cancer survivor, so I have a different perspective. Like when I was 27, I had a sarcoma. I'm 58, and so it gave me a bit different perspective on life because the things that I would push off after cancer, I was like, why am I going to wait until I retire or wait until that? I should try to do everything that I really want to try to do and not push it off, right?
Mhm.
And know that if I beat cancer, then like, what am I worried about? Right. So the idea, like people have their own crucible moment to get past, but a lot of times we push off things thinking that you're going to have more time. And your point now is like you don't always have that. And so you ought to start like thinking about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. And that's my message to the world. Yes, I want to free the founder or help the founder free themselves from being the bottleneck so they can go back with their family. Yes, I want their business to grow and make more money. And yes, I want the family nucleus to be happy and thriving. But at the end of the day, my heart breaks for the little boy or the little girl who's right now saying, where the heck is my dad? And why is that whatever he's doing more important than spending time with me. And dad's over there writing emails thinking he's doing it for the family when the family never asked for it. And so that's really where my heart breaks. But
Yeah.
there's a impact and legacy when everything's working well.
And that's super important for like that to let people know, get a good perspective on what is being a good provider. And it's not just one leg. You got to have that emotional soul heart connection. And a lot of men have kind of gotten away with just having the monetary connection. And we're kind of like we're kind of checking you today. Is like you need to think about that.
Yeah, yeah. No, they think that, yeah, writing the check and I'm doing well. And trust me, I was that guy. So I know, and I know the feeling of writing the check and you kind of pat yourself on the back and back to the grind. But yeah, you're missing out on so many things. And my thing is, what do I want my son or my daughter to talk about me in this current season of life when they're older? And that really makes me reflect on what am I doing now that's having the impact on them aside from the money. And so that's what gives me perspective.
That's super important. I want to point out we do have your QR code. It's been up. Well, that goes to your buybacktimeformula.com/book. So that's your book, right?
Yeah, that's my book, and I lay out all of my frameworks in the book. There's no like go to the secret link and pay me $1,000, $2,000 for the big secret. It is all in the book. And I know that there's people out there like the me of 10 years ago. I call it cash rich, time poor, successful on paper, but failing at home. And I would have paid a mini fortune to collapse the time it took from founder prisoner to present with my son, never missing his games, teaching him how to negotiate real estate at 8 years old. He has a podcast now. He's 11. He's interviewed 40, millionaires and founders, and it's just growing. The thing's blowing up. His trajectory was going to be just being another kid on an iPhone, just like zombie to the world, not knowing how to shake people's hands and look people in the eye. But now he's talking to millionaires and founders, and they're just pouring into him life lessons that they wish they knew at 11. That's just going to empower him and serve him for the rest of his life. And so I'm so thankful that I made the change when I did to be present in my son at the early stage in life. And that could be any founder that's listening right now. But you have to make the decision that, yeah, it's worth it. And I'm going to plug back in.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That story about your son there. That's really cool. 'Cause I'm a big believer in podcast. I think it's a really cool form. Um, it's a format and it's a forum. It gives people a safe space. It allows people to kind of have a personal vision and a connection outside themselves and be able to connect with people. Maybe they wouldn't have known how, and they can try through this like new kind of ether space that we have. But I want to thank you for being on the show today. Again, people can use that QR code. We do have your Instagram there below. The links there will be fully clickable. We've been on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Kick Live. We are on all the other major podcast platforms. They will be available by tomorrow. And we'll create a landing page for everybody to kind of pick whatever platform they want to I share this and watch it and check it out again. But I want to thank you for being on the show on Saturday afternoon. Morning.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Same to you.